She told me, loud enough for the whole room to fall silent. God, Mark, stop acting pathetic. And everyone laughed. Until 10 minutes later, I made a choice that wiped the smiles off every face in that place. Before I dive in, make sure you subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It helps more than you know. The holiday fundraiser at the Lexington Museum was supposed to be a simple Friday night out. Wine, fancy lighting, people pretending to care about art while networking like their lives depended on it. My wife, Lindsay, loved these things. She thrived in polished spaces, surrounded by polished people, shining bright enough to make the rest of us look smudged. I remember standing near a display of blown glass sculptures, holding two champagne flutes, waiting for her to finish a conversation she'd started the moment we walked in. She disappeared into a cluster of her coworkers, marketing people with perfect teeth and loud fake laughs. I'd tagged along hoping we'd spend at least a little time together. Recently, she'd been drifting, short answers, long nights at work, a kind of cold indifference that felt sharper than anger. The museum buzzed with chatter, the kind of soft clinking of glasses that makes a room feel expensive. A jazz trio played near the stairs. Everything smelled faintly of citrus and old stone. I stood there, ignored, like a misplaced coat hanging on the wrong rack. After nearly an hour, I walked over to her group. She was talking to a tall guy named Brent, one of those men who wears confidence like a tailored suit. She rested her hand on his arm as she laughed at something he said. A laugh she hadn't used with me in months that I swallowed it down, kept my tone even. Hey, Lynn, I thought we could maybe walk around together a bit. She didn't even glance at me. Mark, I'm talking. Can you not interrupt? Brent smirked. Someone behind him raised an eyebrow. I felt heat creeping up my neck, but I stayed calm. It'll take a minute, I said quietly. Just wanted to spend a little time with you. That's when she turned, and something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and dismissive, like she was swatting away an annoying salesman. Stop hovering, she snapped. Seriously, you're embarrassing yourself. The group fell silent. A woman next to her shifted uncomfortably, looking anywhere but at me. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'm not hovering. I'm asking my wife to spend time with me. She let out a short, cruel laugh. God, Mark, don't act pathetic. Go mingle or something. The words weren't loud, but they carried. People nearby turned. Brent suddenly found his drink very interesting. My chest tightened, but not from shame, from clarity. Ice-cold clarity. I nodded once. Understood. I didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't raise my voice. I simply walked away, set both champagne glasses on a nearby table, and felt something inside me click into place like a lock. Across the room, I saw her watch me leave. Not with regret, not with concern, with relief. The kind that tells you more than any argument ever could. I moved through the museum slowly, hands in my pockets, letting the quiet corners swallow me. I found a bench near a dimly lit sculpture of a steel tree, its branches tangled like a frozen storm. I sat there, listening to the music, the chatter, her laughter echoing faintly across the hall. I didn't rage. I didn't spiral. I just went still, still in a way that felt unfamiliar, powerful, almost eerie. Like someone who's been pushed 1 inch too far and suddenly sees every option they've been ignoring. I watched shadows stretch across the marble floor as the evening rolled on. Couples drifted past me, dressed in winter coats and warm smiles. One of the museum staff asked if I was all right. I nodded. I was more than all right. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to control. I looked back toward the exhibit hall where she stood, shining in a crowd that fed her ego, where she dismissed me like I was background noise. And I made a decision. A quiet one. A decisive 1.1 she would never see coming. I stayed on that bench longer than I intended, letting the low hum of the museum settle into my bones. By the time I walked back into the main hall, the fundraiser had shifted into its final hour phase. People looser, louder, drunker. Lindsay was still planted next to Brent, her hand now casually brushing his sleeve as she spoke. The moment her eyes flicked toward me, something smug crossed her face, as if she'd successfully put me back in my place earlier. She probably expected me to return with an apology, a joke, some weak attempt to smooth things over so she could keep shining uninterrupted. Instead, I walked past her without hesitation, moving toward a table near the caterers. A few of her coworkers glanced between us, sensing the shift. One of them, a woman named Claire, who'd always been kinder to me than Lindsay ever noticed, caught my eye. She gave me a small, sympathetic nod, like she'd witnessed more tonight than my wife realized that I drifted through the crowd, unnoticed, like a ghost at my own life's event. The truth was simple. This kind of disrespect didn't erupt out of nowhere. It had been growing quietly for months, maybe even years. Missed dinners, brushed off conversations, canceled plans. Every time I reached toward her, physically, emotionally, she pulled away as if my presence was some kind of burden. Tonight, she just made the mistake of doing it in public, loud enough for everyone around her to register the contempt she'd been saving for home. And seeing it on display like that didn't crush me. It clarified me. Near the staircase leading to the balcony level, I spotted Aaron, an old friend from my early career days. He waved me over, sensing I wasn't exactly celebrating. "Rough night?" he asked quietly. His voice didn't carry judgment, just understanding. The kind you get from someone who's lived through their own storms. I shrugged. "Just thinking," I answered. "Looks like Lindsay's having fun," he added carefully, eyes flicking toward her. "Yeah," I said with a calm so steady it surprised even me. "She is." Aaron didn't push. Instead, he talked about work, about his kids, about normal life. And while he spoke, something inside me eased into a colder, more resolved place. A place where emotion no longer clouded judgment. Eventually, the event wound down. People started collecting coats, saying their prolonged goodbyes. Lindsay waltzed over to me with that irritated expression she reserved for moments she needed to pretend we were still a team. "Are you ready or what?" she asked, annoyance dripping from every syllable. I looked at her, really looked, and realized the woman standing in front of me wasn't the woman I'd married. That version, warm, curious, affectionate, had evaporated long ago, replaced by someone who saw me as a prop she no longer needed. The drive home was silent, which wasn't unusual. She scrolled through her phone, laughing at messages she clearly didn't want me to read. I stared ahead, hands steady on the wheel, the city lights reflecting off the windshield like a trail leading away from the life I'd been trapped in. When we reached the house, she walked in without a word, kicked off her heels, and headed straight for the bathroom. The sound of running water echoed down the hallway. I stood in the entryway, looking at the framed photos lining the wall. Vacations, birthdays, stolen, candid moments of a marriage that once felt alive. But those pictures were lies now. Pretty, glossy lies that I walked to my office, shut the door quietly, and sat down at my desk. The house was silent except for the faint sound of Lindsay humming while she removed her makeup. She had no idea that, downstairs, something inside me had shifted into a place beyond return. She had no idea that tonight wasn't just another argument. It was a breaking point carved clean through the middle of our life together that I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and felt the calm settle deeper. Nothing dramatic. No rage. No pacing. Just a cold, clear stillness. A stillness that told me exactly what needed to happen next. And I began preparing, quietly, methodically, without a single word spoken aloud. I stayed in that office long after the house went still. No movement, no footsteps, just the low hum of the furnace and the occasional drip from the kitchen sink. Lindsay had fallen asleep quickly, like someone whose day had ended perfectly, with no need to think twice about the person sharing her roof. I sat there in the dim light, staring at the documents in front of me. Bank statements, insurance files, the lease. Every piece of our shared life laid out like evidence. And the truth hit hard. I'd built the foundation of a life she no longer cared to stand on. I didn't move fast. I didn't rush. I began sorting through everything slowly, deliberately. What was mine, what was hers, what was ours by obligation, but never by appreciation. Every motion felt oddly natural, like my hands already knew what to do. I gathered my personal papers into one stack, slid hers into another, and left the shared documents in a clean pile that I wouldn't be touching again. The silence around me felt strangely protective, like the house itself understood the shift taking place inside these walls. From the doorway, the bedroom light flicked off, casting the hall into darkness. Lindsay never called out to ask where I was. She never opened the door to check on me. She didn't even seem to register that I hadn't climbed into bed beside her. That absence of concern told me more than anything she'd said all night, that I logged into our joint accounts and stared at the numbers glowing on the screen. The reality was simple. For years, I'd been the one ensuring everything ran smoothly. Bills paid on time, savings built, future protected. She'd coasted on the structure I provided, spending freely, certain that no matter how she treated me, the stability would remain. I transferred my share to my private account, the account she'd always brushed off as unnecessary when I suggested she start one of her own. I didn't touch a penny more than what I'd contributed. I wasn't interested in revenge through money. I just refused to leave myself stranded after years of holding both of us up. When everything was sorted, I moved on to what mattered most, the note. A single sheet of paper, plain direct. I wrote it without anger, without dramatic words or threats. Just truth. Truth she'd never made space for while I was standing in front of her trying to speak it. When I finished, I placed the note on the kitchen counter, right next to the coffee maker she used every morning, right where she'd see it before she even fully opened her eyes. Next came the practical part. I pulled out 2 suitcases, ones I used for work trips years ago, and filled them with the essentials. Clothes, toiletries, the watch my father left me, a handful of books I always moved with no matter where I lived. The small things that actually meant something. I carried the bags to the truck in 2 quiet trips, the cold air sharp against my face, the driveway slick with the frost of early winter. Each breath I took outside felt cleaner than any breath I'd taken inside that house in months. Back inside, I walked down the hallway one more time. The bedroom door was cracked open, the room dim. I stood at the threshold for a few seconds, listening to her breathe, the deep, peaceful rhythm of someone who felt completely safe. Someone who believed tomorrow would look exactly like today. I didn't step closer. I didn't touch her. I didn't whisper anything sentimental. I simply turned away. The final thing I took was the small toolbox from the garage. Not because I needed it tonight, but because leaving it behind felt symbolic of something I wasn't willing to do anymore. Fix what someone else kept breaking. At 4:12 a.m., I started the truck and drove away from the house slowly. No music, no radio, no second thoughts. The neighborhood was asleep, silent, and unaware that a marriage had ended right under its streetlights. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once. Half an hour later, I checked into a modest extended-stay hotel off the interstate. The clerk barely glanced at me, handing over the key card as if men walking in with packed bags at dawn were a normal occurrence. Maybe they were. Inside the room, I set my suitcases down, sat on the edge of the bed, and felt the first quiet moment of full, unfiltered peace settle into my chest. Not relief, not triumph, just clarity that I stayed there for a long time, staring out the window as the sky slowly shifted from black to soft gray. A new day, but not just any day. A day without pretending. A day without walking on eggshells in my own home. A day I hadn't realized I'd been craving for years. And as the sun finally pushed through the horizon, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The sun rose slowly over the highway outside my hotel window, painting the room in pale gold. I sat at the small desk with a cup of burnt lobby coffee, opening my laptop like it was the first tool of a new life. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I was rebuilding, quietly, deliberately, the same way I'd carried the weight of our old life alone for years. By 7 a.m., I'd sent an email to my supervisor requesting time off. He replied within minutes, no questions, just support. I scheduled appointments, legal, financial, logistical, and set up everything Lindsay had always assumed I would handle forever. Except now, the only future I was organizing was my OWNTHBY mid-morning. My new phone, vibrated with a message from an unknown number. She's panicking, the text read. It was from Grace, my sister. Lindsay had called her in tears, claiming I'd vanished, leaving out the part where she'd shoved me out of our life long before I ever walked out the door. I thanked Grace and asked her not to get involved. She understood. Everyone who'd watched our marriage crack over time understood. Back at the house, Lindsay was piecing together the reality of what she'd always taken for granted. She'd woken up to an empty side of the bed, then walked into a kitchen where the note sat waiting on the counter like a quiet verdict. I could imagine the moment she read it. The shock, the disbelief, the slow realization that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't sulking, wasn't playing some dramatic game. I was gone because I was done. Calls poured into my old number, each one bouncing off the disconnected message she never thought she'd hear. She tried friends, co-workers, my brother, even my mother. Every one of them gave her the same answer. He doesn't want to be found. It wasn't cruelty. It was respect. They finally saw me fighting for myself instead of begging for a place in my own marriage. While she spiraled, I focused on the simple, steady tasks of a man starting fresh. I found a new apartment, a clean, quiet place with tall windows and a balcony overlooking a small park. The landlord handed me the keys that afternoon. No hesitation, no shared signatures, just mine. The first space I'd lived in that wasn't built around someone else's approval. Weeks passed. Lindsay tried every angle, anger, guilt, denial, but none of it found its way to me. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires attachment. I'd set mine down the night she publicly dismissed me like background noise. I was somewhere lighter now, clearer, building days that didn't revolve around the whims of someone who'd long stopped seeing me. And then life shifted again, not with drama, but with something gentler. I met Rachel at a supply shop near one of the construction sites I visited. She worked the counter, warm smile, steady voice. She asked about my project, not out of politeness, but actual interest. That small sincerity felt like sunlight after a long winter. We started talking every time I came in, then grabbing coffee, then dinner. She laughed at my jokes, not politely, not performatively, but because she genuinely found them funny. She reached for my hand without hesitation. She asked about my day and actually listened. She made me remember what it felt like to be wanted, not tolerated. Months later, Lindsay signed the divorce papers in a quiet office downtown. No applause, no audience, no grand confrontation. Just the consequence of choices she'd assumed would never cost her anything. She moved into a smaller place across the city, one she could afford without the income she'd depended on while dismissing the man who earned it. Her world grew smaller. Mine grew wider. One evening not long after, I ran into Eleanor, her cousin, at the grocery store. She looked unsure, torn between greeting me and pretending she hadn't seen me. I walked over first. I wasn't hiding from anyone. She told me Lindsay was struggling. Lonely, tired, different. I nodded. I'm sorry she's hurting, I said truthfully. But I'm not going back. Eleanor studied my face and finally understood. Not because I was cold, but because I looked genuinely at peace. That night, back in my apartment, Rachel curled up next to me on the couch, her head resting lightly against my shoulder. She asked about my day. I asked about hers. Simple, easy, real. The air around us was soft and warm. Nothing to prove, nothing to fear, nothing to tiptoe around. I looked at her fingers gently intertwined with mine and understood something I wish I'd learned sooner. Respect isn't earned by sacrificing yourself. It's found when you stop settling for someone who treats you like a placeholder. Lindsay once demanded space. She got it. And I got something better. A life where I could finally breathe without asking permission. If you've stayed with me through all 4 parts, do me a favor, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support means more than you know.